The Las Vegas Raiders cannot hire Antonio Pierce as their full-time head coach. Let me explain. Unfortunately, the Raiders find themselves in a really tough situation right now because Antonio Pierce is beloved by both players and coaches as well as the Raider Nation fan base, and he is the heavy favorite right now to be the next head coach full-time of the Las Vegas Raiders. Owner Mark Davis found himself in a very similar situation his last coaching cycle when he could have stuck with Rich Bisaccia, who led the Raiders to the playoffs after the John Gruden stuff, the Henry Ruggs stuff, the Damon Arnett stuff. That 2020 Raiders team faced a lot of turmoil, and between him and Derek Carr, Rich Bisaccia galvanized that locker room. So the Raiders had a very, very difficult decision to make at that time. Do they stick with the guy who helped galvanize the locker room, or do they make the flashy, sexy hire? Mark Davis made the flashy, sexy hire in Josh McDaniels, and he lived to regret that decision. I'm not here to rehash that trauma for Raider Nation. However, with Antonio Pierce, there's an opportunity for Mark Davis to sort of right his wrongs and stick with the interim guy who is beloved in the locker room. However, per NFL rules, he's going to have to do a formalized coaching search, even if he does want to stick with Antonio Pierce. He also has to follow the Rooney Rule, which states that 2 external minority candidates must be interviewed for the job. So in this scenario, Antonio Pierce would not count as a Rooney Rule interview. They must be from outside the building. The Raiders and the NFL are kind of between a rock and a hard place because if they do want to stick with Antonio Pierce as the full-time guy and they conduct a head coaching search, it would essentially be a sham search. And we've seen the NFL have some hot water on their hands for being involved with sham coaching searches. In 2015, Tennessee Titans defensive coordinator Ray Horton was passed on for a head coaching interview in favor of Mike Mularkey, who ended up getting the job full time. Then, in the 2019 coaching cycle, Brian Flores is accused to have been given a sham interview by the Denver Broncos, who then went out and hired Vic Fangio as their head coach. The Raiders cannot afford to have a very similar situation happen here, especially with 2 pending lawsuits between the NFL, Ray Horton, and Brian Flores. So if they were indeed going to conduct a head coaching search, it would have to be in good faith, and they would have to give legitimate interviews to every single candidate out there. That would probably involve hiring a head coaching search firm. A lot of those services are out there for NFL teams to use, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if that is what happened here. Antonio Pierce has done a phenomenal job since taking over as Raiders head coach. He's led them to a 3-4 record. They went and dominated the Chargers at home 63-14 on that Thursday night game. The following week on Christmas Day, they went into Kansas City and they shocked the Chiefs and upset them at their own field. That's something that you don't see often from a team that's being coached by an interim guy. I'm not saying that Antonio Pierce does not deserve this job. I absolutely believe he does. Unfortunately, the NFL and the Raiders have to go through the motions and conduct a search in good faith and legitimately interview outside candidates. And if the Raiders stumble across a candidate that Mark Davis strongly feels could do a better job than Antonio Pierce, it would not surprise me at all if he were to go in that direction. If the Raiders could entice somebody like Ben Johnson to come in, who's the Lions offensive coordinator and probably the hottest commodity right now on the head coaching market, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went in that direction. I've also heard Jim Harbaugh potentially being thrown out there as somebody that Mark Davis really, really covets. I've also even heard that the Raiders may want to try to get John Gruden back. Per Benjamin Albright, who is an NFL insider and Broncos beat reporter, John Gruden actually might be a legitimate option here. They could somehow work through the lawsuit motions and they could get this dismissed somehow, and John Gruden could very well be the next head coach for the 3rd stint as the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. I don't see that happening. I feel like the bridge is kind of burned there between Gruden and the fan base, but I feel like Antonio Pierce, even through having to go through a head coaching search, is the favorite to land the Raiders full-time coaching gig. Unfortunately, For Raider Nation, the Raiders still have to go through the motions here, and if they find somebody who they feel like will do a better job, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they went in that direction. That's something that I really feel like would burn a lot of bridges between Mark Davis and this Raiders fan base, which is already pretty fragile, honestly. I know a lot of Raiders fans here in Denver are very impatient with Mark Davis, and understandably so. Ever since he took over as the full-time owner after his father's death in 2011, this Raiders team has been a completely floundering organization who's toiled through multiple different head coaches between Dennis, I think even Hugh Jackson was a Mark Davis hire. I could be wrong on that. I don't know if Hugh Jackson was a Mark or an Al Davis hire, but you had Hugh Jackson, you had Dennis Allen, you had, I believe it was, Tony Sparano in between them as the interim head coach. You had Jack Del Rio. You had obviously John Gruden, Rich Bisaccia, and now Antonio Pierce. I've seen a lot of turnover in this Raiders organization being a Broncos fan, and I actually feel really bad for Raider Nation. They're a very loyal fan base, a very passionate fan base. Every time that I go to Broncos Raiders games here in Denver, it's always an awesome experience. Raider Nation shows out big time, and it's been pretty painful, honestly, going to some of those games in person the last few years, because the first game of the Rich Bisaccia era, ironically enough, was on the road in Denver, and they came in here and absolutely destroyed the Broncos. It was an embarrassing performance by the Broncos and just a complete domination by the Raiders. The Raiders have shown fight, grit, and toughness in this situation before when they fired John Gruden, and they had to go through a lot more turmoil organizationally. Now, again, Mark Davis has a chance to right his wrongs. The question is, will he do it? All right, Raider Nation, I am curious. If Antonio Pierce is not hired as the full-time head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, because I feel like collectively all of you guys want him to be the next head coach, who would you like to be the guy? Would you like it to be Jim Harbaugh or somebody else? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. All right, guys, be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, everybody. Those are two free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out and helps us get seen by more and more NFL fans just like you and me. I really appreciate all of the love and support that we've gotten on this channel over the last couple of weeks. We've gotten a lot of growth. We've grown almost 300 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible. The video the other day that we put out covering the Taylor Decker incident got almost 200,000 views, which is absolutely insane. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.